Hello, 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 and thanks for joining me once again for this year's Microsoft Ignite recap. So, Microsoft Ignite 2022 was just last week, and it was held in person in various different spaces across the US, the UK, Europe, all over. Now, across all these different events, there was lots of different announcements, lots of different bits of news, loads of different things going on. And as always, they've published a book of news. So that means we can have a quick skim and just get a bit of a recap of all the different announcements across all the different sessions to say, what happened last week? What was going on? Now, unfortunately, I was off gallivanting in other conferences in Europe, and so I wasn't around for Ignite itself. So I'm kind of catching up, and I thought I'd share my bit of a catch-up with you guys, just to talk about the announcements and see what's going on. As always, if you're new around here, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know down in the comments if these are the things you're waiting for. What do you want to see announced in Ignite? I'm going to admit it's a little bit bare bones on the analytics side of data and AI. There's some Synapse updates, but it's kind of like just a normal monthly Synapse update now. There isn't any big new features we can be talking about. But we'll have a look through, we'll have a dig, and we'll see what is going on. So, without further ado, here's the book of news. So, again, they started this a couple of years ago now. And whenever there's a big Microsoft conference and it's got loads and loads of updates, they publish this book of news that just wraps up lots and lots of different changes. One-stop shop to get all the different updates. So we can have a bit of a skim and then dig into some things from here. So there's a few different sections. AI comes up first. We can have a quick chat about that. You guys know AI isn't really my side of things, but I'm always keen to keep an eye on what's going on. So firstly, we've got this. The OpenAI service hosted in Azure. So you can get the OpenAI service. The OpenAI API is something that is ran by a third party. But this is a new preview limited access service, part of the Cognitive Services thing that kind of Microsoft do, which gives you access to things like DALL-E 2. Now, if you've not seen DALL-E 2, that's the image generator. I'm sure you've seen tons and tons of people tweeting and kind of talking about it, where you can type just a sentence of, I don't know, a duck holding an umbrella up to some lightning on top of a mountain, and it will generate an image that kind of matches that. This entirely unique, that is entirely AI generated. So exposure to things like that is pretty darn cool. Again, very limited access right now, but it's something they're building on. Hopefully kind of we'll eventually see it just become part of the available cognitive services, where if you wanted to generate a brand new image just to represent something, just as part of your reporting, part of your analytics, just to theme something, you could now do that, which is really interesting. I'm not quite sure it's a business critical task, but interesting stuff. So we've got various things in the other cognitive services. So we're seeing the natural language generation, its ability to write text, the whole kind of GPT kind of thing. That's all getting better. And there's a bit of a theme in terms of lots of these ones about kind of either being able to recognize kind of speech and transcribe it, to generate text into speech. There's lots of improvements across all of these pieces. So things like being able to summarize data. That whole thing where you can feed it a giant document and it'll go, okay, I've reduced the document by 90%. Here's the cliff notes. This is what you need to understand. Things like that baked into an API, so you can just sling it a giant document and go, right, this is roughly about that. Really interesting, and lots of improvements going in. Computer vision, got a couple of new things. So the new version of the image analyzer. So that's where you give it an image and it'll say, well, okay, here's a little kind of taxonomy of what this image contains. This image contains a pavement with a bird and a motorbike and a lamppost, and just so you can then do searches across all of your big, massive bank of images. Where did it contain these things? What are the mood? What are the faces, people? All of that kind of stuff is encapsulated in that image analysis API, and it's going up to version 4 with a load of new stuff in there. On the other side of things, got spatial analysis for the edge. So this is when we have like a film of like a stream of video, and because it's on the edge, we put it on a device. So we can essentially have like a CCTV, like a camera set up in a shop, a little edge device next to it that's actually doing spatial awareness. It can see where people are walking in 3D space, despite getting this 2D stream of video. Really interesting use cases. Things like looking at flow of people walking around a shop. Could they actually reorganize it to make the flow better? Things like looking at a gym to say, well, actually, where are the hot spots? And actually, if they move the weights over there, they would increase flow and actually increase space and generally make it a better space. So many interesting things you can do with spatial analysis that you can do on top of a video that just has so many commercial use cases. So yeah, really, really, really interesting seeing these guys, these new APIs in preview as just a straightforward cognitive services you can get as part of the computer vision stack. Really interesting. I mentioned the speech, so being able to do kind of speech to text and text to speech. So including that service is getting even better, adding some more stuff, essentially being able to kind of plug it into other places and being able to do kind of other kind of emotional, synthesizing emotion in terms of the speech that's said or how it's read. Again, really interesting stuff. Not something I do huge amounts with myself, but it's interesting seeing that kind of grow and improve and lots more stuff happening in it. Form recognizer. Form recognizer is an interesting one, and that actually does come into analytics a huge amount. So that's when we have, so generally form recognizer has been around for a few years now. That comes in and we have like a known form. So I get the form and this box contains their address, this is their name, this is the details of what they purchased. Like if you had like an invoice and it was a fixed thing, form recognizer is very good at just scanning that, getting the image of that document, and then pulling apart the information and turning that just into structured data. So this is what we're talking now, is saying actually this is going to be good in terms of doing contract parsing. So big, massive, wordy contracts that are much more free text and less of boxes of information, more just here is a giant document, and being able to pull out who were the various parties, what were the payment terms, what was the termination clauses. Being able to go and actually understand contract language is something that legal firms have been like trying to look at and trying to build their own services to do for years. So having it as just part of the form recognizer service, really great. Again, massive use cases of tons of firms that just have thousands, hundreds of thousands of contracts and case documents and all those things. Being able to throw this into form recognizer, extract the pertinent information, and store that as structured information without having to go through these massive documents. Just all very good. Other bits and pieces around just Azure Machine Learning itself. So some additional things. So Azure Machine Learning Registries is an interesting one. So that's kind of like basically a repository for being able to share things like models and training scripts and pipelines to kind of create and train those models. Various different artifacts to do with the production of machine learning objects. Being able to store that as a registry and then use it across various different workspaces, subscriptions, kind of a general way of managing your machine learning estate. Now it's interesting because for me there's a lot of crossover there in terms of what things like MLflow are doing. So MLflow is already a machine learning repository. It already allows you to do a lot of those things. So it's kind of like how that compares to the existing MLflow stuff, how it changes patterns. Is it meant to be a compete? Does it have some of the MLflow? I mean, we've seen in Azure Machine Learning, there is lots and lots of MLflow compatibility baked into it. Now, I've not looked at all into the machine learning registries as to, is it talking the same language? Can you use MLflow API? Or is it literally a competitor? It's doing the similar thing, but it's putting its own stamp on it. Don't know, honestly. Just having a skip. Other things, so there's kind of containers for doing PyTorch specifically. So if that's what you're doing, you've been building your own kind of customized containers for it. There's now some pre-canned curated environments to go and do that rather than have to build your own, which makes sense. And then responsible AI. Now, again, that's been a real theme of Azure Machine Learning for a while now. We've seen things coming in terms of some telemetry and observability in terms of kind of model fairness, model bias, just some tools to help you track it on a model by model basis. And this is pushing it even further and saying, well, actually now there's a pre-canned responsible AI dashboard. There's a responsible AI scorecard, essentially a bunch of metrics just to try and make sure we're all talking the same language. We're all using the same benchmarks to say, am I using AI responsibly? And then you can publish that. You can be transparent. You can bang, look, this is how responsible we are with all the models that were made, all the models that we're publishing, all the models that are part of our application, if that's what you're using it for. This is how we maintain the responsibility. So rather than everyone just building their own thing and publishing their own stats and doing it in their own way, having I guess what they're trying to move towards is an industry standard for measuring and reporting on responsible AI. Okay, really useful. Other bits and pieces that we've got. So some more automation, some more kind of pushing things out, kind of more in terms of AutoML. So that's kind of when it's generating the model for you. Improved Python SDK, so you can do some more stuff. You can do better automation of Azure Machine Learning itself. Spark pools, again, you know I love a bit of Spark. So being able to do more things on top of Spark and using those kind of Spark clusters directly from Azure Machine Learning rather than having to build things and then push it over makes a lot of sense. And finally, Hugging Face. So Hugging Face is kind of a very common growing language model. And being able to actually sort of do that, the same as like the OpenAI interface, it's being able to use these very, very common, very popular, very much growing machine learning kind of services, but within the security confines, within the robustness and rigor of cognitive services. So they're testing out managed endpoints for Hugging Face within Azure ML currently. Loads of stuff going on the AI side of things. Final piece, again, very much not really in my wheelhouse, is this thing, Project Bonsai, which I'll take a look at. It's been around for a little while. Essentially, it's machine teaching, not machine learning. And I've been digging in to find out what actually that means. And that's more when we're talking about things like manufacturing. We're talking about, kind of essentially the modeling of physical interaction and how you teach something to actually sort of work within those realms. So the examples they have is things like, holding a ball on a plate. And, if you move it, if you change your pitch and your yaw of your kind of how you're holding it, the ball moves. And it's giving parameters to the model saying, well, actually, if the ball leaves this tolerance area, that's a failure. If the ball stays there, that's a thing. And it's essentially allowing people to define these parameters. They're not writing a model. They're not writing a machine learning model that tells it how to move it. They're defining parameters and letting this learn from mistakes and slowly, through a feedback loop, improve and improve and improve and build its own models. That's the general idea. I'm sure I've butchered it. And it's really interesting when you dig into it, kind of the use cases that are largely around kind of automation and manufacturing and kind of physical industry. But yeah, super, super interesting. And so there's loads of changes going on there. Lots of interesting kind of movements going on there. That's all I'm going to go. I'd say if you're interested, that sounds interesting, go and dig into it. I guess the key point there is almost like when you have tools like SpecFlow allowing kind of business analysts to define tests that are put around a piece of software. This is trying to do the same, but for machine learning and saying, allowing engineers to define a load of acceptance criteria and then having the model be produced based on those acceptance criteria rather than someone sitting down and building a model. Really, really interesting approach. Okay, so that was AI. That's the AI side of things. As we said, lots and lots of stuff going on. Over on the Azure Data side of the fence. Now, again, you know me, I'm an analytics guy. I'm mainly going to be focusing on the analytics side of things. There's some changes that we're seeing in more kind of the traditional data sources, the different formats of Cosmos DB, that kind of thing, and we'll talk about it briefly. But I'm interested in what's going on in terms of analytics. So we've got pieces around this. We've got pieces around, we saw in the kind of, I think the last major Microsoft conference, was that Build? Can't remember. I think they're talking about the Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform. This is kind of like the new catch-all term, a bit like we had the Cortana suite a little while ago. This is the Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform, encapsulates all the places where you can store data and do analytics and do machine learning on top of it. So kind of a bundle of various different solutions. And one of the big pushes in terms of this conference is about the partner ecosystem. So talking about going, yeah, we have these various different tools in Azure for managing and working with data, but also we're bringing in a whole bunch of these partner integrations. So they're talking about bringing Mongo and Yugabyte DB. I've never come across Yugabyte. Looking at how we actually do Informatica, Confluent, DBT Labs, Fivetran, Click, and Stream. And that's interesting because a lot of those we're seeing massive growth, especially kind of, I do a lot of work with Databricks. And if you're working with Databricks, then DBT and Fivetran and those guys are coming up a huge amount. So that kind of is almost kind of the Databricks stack of kind of slightly more low code, slightly more kind of dev accelerator tools. So seeing that same language, those same players, those same partners baked into the message of they're making it much easier to work with partners in this ecosystem is great. Now, I will admit the thing that made me slightly worried when I was looking at this going, and Databricks is where? And that's been a bit of a theme in terms of some Microsoft conferences, in that Azure Databricks is just there. And Databricks are talking about all their features and what their future is in the roadmap and the strategy. And Databricks is just another thing you can do. It's not really, it's not talked about as part of the real future strategy of Microsoft. Until Ignite last week. So go with two things. Firstly, looking at this new partner ecosystem, you'll have seen this image thrown around all over the place, which is just essentially showing those various partners that are now part of the ecosystem. And I was having a bit of a look through here. So it's all talking about how you build these various different additional vendors into it. Talks about these various different tools that are now part of it. Doesn't really tell you what that happens. So I'm assuming there's going to be a new kind of partner connect kind of thing, a new way of deploying and integrating these various different tools and companies into the Azure platform. Because it's fine just having a list going, here's some other partners that sell good things. Don't really know how are they making it easier to use these things. I mean, one of the big things that kind of people have been looking at, I mean, a gap that has been in Azure for ages and ages and ages is master data management. Ever since we moved away from on-prem and we lost SQL Server's master data services, you know, I still hold a little special place for in my heart. We haven't really had a good MDM solution. So, you know, we've got kind of now this message saying we'll prophecy include in our good partners to do master data management baked into existing Azure tools. But there's no information about how baked in it is. No information about how easily you can deploy these various different third-party tools as part of your platform. So it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves. Is it going to be essentially more blueprinting? Is it a hosted resource? Do we have to deploy a VM and install these things on there? Which I really hope not. It's always going to be interesting how these things actually fit in. And I'm sure there's going to be slightly different stories across the board. But I don't know what it actually means. So we'll see. On the Databricks point, so actually there was a really short session, like a 3-4 minute session with Scott Guthrie and Ali Godsey talking about that Microsoft Databricks relationship. And it's interesting digging into it again as part of that intelligent data platform. But there's a big commitment here saying that actually they do want to deepen that relationship and they want to do more between Microsoft and Databricks, which again is fantastic news. That's a reassurance that we want as people who do a lot of Databricks on Azure. We want to see them actually building and strengthening that partnership. But I don't know what's changed. So they talk about, you know, they've strengthened that partnership. Cool. In what way? How? What's happened? And there's just not really a lot of information in there. There's a few things that are alluded to. So it mentions that actually, you know, kind of the core of governance is bringing together Purview and Unity Catalog. I'm like, oh, yeah, great. I've not seen it. I've not seen any integration. I'm not seeing it working together. But if they're putting a stake in the ground and saying, we're going to integrate these governance functions and we're going to give you a single pane of experience for data analytics, yeah, fantastic. I want to see that. I don't want to be using Unity Catalog for one thing and Purview for a different thing, and then I have two different governance tools that I'm using. I want to see an integrated, cohesive experience. So really interested to see across all these different use cases how we're going to see these working together a bit more. How we're going to see this partnership actually in action rather than, yeah, some nice words and a little blog post. What are we actually going to see that closer relationship, that closer partnership, you know, kind of actual features and functionality and integrations coming out to improve all of these different areas, to improve how the Lakehouse standard is kind of standardized, to improve how machine learning works between the two of them, especially there's now an Azure ML repository, which is separate from ML Flow. How we see that bringing together to work. So really interesting, good to hear, but again, I want to see more detail. So yeah, more stuff. Other things that we have. So Cosmos DB now has a Postgres support. So it's another different flavor within Cosmos DB. If you're trying to do a NoSQL kind of database in there, which is okay, cool, good to know. The other different features, again, kind of other elements, kind of more around the kind of the data management side. So now, if you're using Azure Database for Postgres, that's the kind of not the Azure SQL DB, the Azure NoSQL DB offering that's already there. But you're now getting better encryption. You're getting encryption and REST, customer managed keys, that kind of thing. So again, just a slight improvement of the service. We're also seeing kind of Azure Database for MySQL get things like autoscale. So autoscaling the mainly the I/O, the kind of the disk writing thing, just to get over some scale bottlenecks and just allow you to scale that even better. And so again, just nice features, nice improvements. Not really on my analytics side of the fence. The other things that we can see, Oracle Data Studio now has a migration wizard to allow you to look at an Oracle database and tell you how you can bring it into an Azure platform. So how would you take it? Would you put that over to an Azure Postgres SQL? Would it be an Azure SQL DB? Would it be a SQL DB with hyperscale? Is it somewhere else? Just helping you make that migration path and kind of work out based on what you have, where you should be going, how you would move that into Azure. And then we get some Synapse changes. And again, not a huge number of changes. So a couple of things. So one, we've got a new pipeline template, but specifically for Microsoft 365. And again, that's kind of like a little bit of a wizard to go through going, I want to import this data, next. And that'll build a mapping data flow for you, sucking that data in and then landing it into your kind of Synapse estate. So I've not really had a too big a dig into it. But again, interesting kind of that we can, kind of just deepening that integration, bringing things in. I prefer it wasn't mapping data flows and having to spin up kind of the Spark cluster that goes behind it, because I normally have another Spark cluster set up. I prefer to just copy data into a lake and then go and start doing things from there. But still, it makes that experience easier. And again, it's nice that it's fairly low code. So people trying to do that, if people are looking after that Microsoft 365 and they're trying to publish that data, they're trying to stand up a data product based on that data, then they can do that fairly easily without a load of tech skills to try and do it. It's useful. The other one we've seen, R language support in preview inside Synapse Spark pools. Now, that was always a weird thing when Azure Synapse Spark first was announced and it came out. And ta-da, we're based on open source Spark. Open source Spark supports Scala, Java, Python, R, and SQL. R supports R. Spark has supported R for many years. So when they announced that Synapse Spark was coming out and it was bringing support for Scala, Python, SQL, and C#, they added a new language to it, but they took away a language that already had full Spark engine support. And it's taken, what, a year and a half, 2 years, to then come and add R back in. So, yeah, slightly strange. Very good to see. There's obviously a load of R users. It's not as popular as it used to be from what we've seen, but we still see a huge amount of R usage in academia, in kind of actuarial jobs and financial services. We do see pockets of real R specialists where the community is very strong and where the libraries have exploded. We are seeing a bit more of a move to Python for kind of general kind of private sector data science, but that's just in our experience. That's what we see as fairly Sparky people. So great, fantastic, very good to see that being plumbed in. Also, the Synapse ML library is getting better. We did talk about that in the last update. So yeah, it's good that it's getting even better. Then other bits, we've got some Azure Data Explorer updates. So again, kind of we keep seeing like more and more kind of each month, lots more changes going in and kind of making it just easier and easier to go and grab data. So we see kind of a load of extra ingestion sources. So Data Explorer can go and get data from S3 buckets and Amazon. It can go use Synapse Link, which is really important because Synapse Link is that thing that allows us to have an intermediary analytical store between things like Cosmos DB. So Cosmos DB, massively high concurrency, very quick read and write to single objects. But trying to do a big batch kind of analytical query, it's not really very good at it. So Synapse Links just makes an intermediary analytical store that's kept asynchronously updated on the Cosmos DB side that we can then query from things like Synapse Serverless or Synapse Spark pools. So being able to do that from Data Explorer, just, yeah, great, really useful, just improves it all the same. So again, just useful additional integrations, useful things that Data Explorer can now talk to just to make things even better. We've got the SAP CDC, so we saw that going into preview in previous Synapse updates. So that's just allowing you to use a mapping data flow to go and connect to various different SAP sources and use CDC. So just say, give me the change feed. Only tell me what's changed since I last queried it. Again, very useful if you have a big, mature SAP estate and you're trying to get the data from that and integrate it into an Azure Analytics platform. Again, just super useful, lots of things to use. Then we've got, I think the final thing we've actually got across all of the Ignite points. I mean, again, that's not a huge amount of analytics announcements to be happening. And we've got some Purview information. So some different things happening. So better lineage for SQL. So SQL Dynamic Lineage now going GA. Fine-grained lineage for BI models now going now in preview. That's useful, but that doesn't give us that much information. Like, okay. We've got metamodels, which allow you to put an additional kind of business process map on top of the data estate that you've scanned. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I was searching around for it, just searching Purview metamodel, all that kind of stuff. I'm just not finding a single thing. It was tumbleweed all around. Eventually I managed to grab, so this one, So add business context to your hybrid data estate with Microsoft Purview is actually the related blog that gives you all the information about this, the announcements made at Ignite. So, bit of a weird one, but it didn't really tell us much about it. But yes, we have things like this. So we've got Purview metamodel. It actually looks like this, where we've got this idea of these different groups and the relationships and how they link to each other. I can't really get a better picture of it, but okay. So being able to put this mapping of different asset types and kind of just, again, it's building it as a map. So you can see that process of an organization has departments. Departments own business processes. Business processes consume and produce data sets. And just that additional context to how all of your various different assets and asset types actually work. So it's not something that's being produced by a scan. It's not something that is kind of being produced by your classifications and things. It's allowing you to put that additional layer of context on top of the various object types that you've got inside Purview. So I've not had a chance to look at it yet, but again, super interesting, really interesting to see what that looks like as that overall map to help people understand how these various different things interrelate. So additional stuff, you've got kind of some more automated workflows, which is good. So being able to have, kind of some physical process requests and approval requests and that kind of thing, helping people like the data owners managing their various data states mapped inside Purview, helping them actually automate their workflows, which makes sense. Some better machine learning elements. So being able to actually sort of improve the classifications that actually work. And again, kind of they've got people's names, physical addresses, making it better to work out, oh, that's a name, that's definitely a name, that's a person's name. So there's new things going in there to help with that classifications when you're running your data scans. And then, yeah, lineage getting better. Now, one of the things I was excited about is this manual lineage. So when we've seen lineage inside Purview, that's when it already has the ability to do it. So if I'm doing a data factory copy data activity, and I've hooked data factory up to Purview, and I say copy data from that table into that place in the lake. Then when I look into Purview, it'll go, right, there's lineage there. I know I went from that table and I know I put it there in the lake. And the only way you could get to manually do that and go, well, actually, there's a manual process where someone picks it up, does something and puts it down. But you couldn't get that tracked without using the API and just assembling this JSON object, pushing that to Purview, saying, please integrate this. So the ability for someone to manually go, oh, there's a manual process, I'll capture that and just add manual lineage to kind of fill in those gaps is great. And the fact that it's getting better at understanding things. So if it's looking at an Azure SQL DB, it'll be able to figure out that there's lineage based on some of the SQL being written and that kind of thing. So definitely improvements, better, it's filling a gap. I mean, it's hard when you... Basically, what's the point in having data lineage if you've got the start of your data mapped and then something happens in the middle and you lose all relationship from where you got the data to where it went? That's a no man's land of darkness that nothing happened. And then you've got the Power BI side and you've got loads of richness there. Unless you've got full lineage end to end, it's not that useful. So having this and being able to actually fill any gaps, even if it is manual, even if it's saying something happens there, this is a process, this is who owns that process, that is good just to know that data set goes into there. That model, which previously just comes from somewhere we're not sure where, this is where it comes from, and we can fill in those blanks. That is so important in making sure that your governance picture, your mapping of your data estate is complete. So really happy to see that going in. Again, more insights. So kind of now almost like a scorecard saying this is what you need to go and do. This is what you need to go and look after as part of the insights that you're getting out of Purview. And again, kind of based on all the things that you've gone and scanned, all the things that you've gone and done, it's now just a little bit more proactive. It's saying, this is what you need to go and do. This is as a result of everything we scanned. You need to go and look at this. This is dangerous. You're out of you're missing your KPIs. So whereas previously it was just like, here's a load of information. This is how many data sources you have that I've got a sensitive bank of data in there. This is now saying you have incomplete information. You need to go and finish mapping your data. It's a little bit more actionable insight kind of driven. So yeah, really happy actually seeing all those changes going into Purview. Just a little bit weird that we have like a real light summary that's actually, there's way more to it when you actually dig and you find that blog post. So I'll put the links to both the book of news and that blog post down below so you can then use that to dig in and see what's going on. And yeah, that's it. So loads of things going on. There's obviously things in the Power Platform. There's kind of changes to Power Automate. There's other things outside of that. That's not really my bag. And yeah, so it's interesting seeing the focus. The focus has very much been, if you're doing analytics and you're doing kind of big things, there's a partner ecosystem out there. And there's a couple of changes into Synapse. There's tons and tons going on the AI space. Loads of really interesting things. Really, really interesting to see the integrations with the big things that people are talking about. People are very excited about text generation right now. Like something, prose writing and generate me a film script that belongs to this and just spitting out readable human-like text. People are very excited about AI image generation. It's something that we did in AA just last week. We kind of came up with a load of like banners for some of our different social groups that we did entirely using AI generated images, and they came out amazingly. It's something that there's like a huge amount of excitement for out in industry, but a lot of them are just like open little toy APIs that you're playing with. So seeing kind of this real movement to say, hey, this stuff that people are excited about, that are using, they're trying to find use cases for, you can do it inside Azure, inside a secure environment with, SLAs and with kind of Active Directory security and all that kind of stuff. Again, it's really nice to actually sort of see that coming as now here's how you use it in anger so quickly after these things have suddenly become very, very big. So yeah, loads of stuff going on. And yeah, as always, let me know which bits you're excited about. If there's any bits that I just glossed over when, oh, that's that thing, okay. And you're like, no, that's really important, that's awesome. Let me know down in the comments. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. And yeah, I'll catch you next time, hopefully looking into some of these pieces. Cheers.